Three friends and I were out to dinner last week, and we went to a restaurant. Now they said you could win your meal, the full cost of it. And we were the lucky winners. Unfortunately, they said if you had to peel back, this had to be solved. Well, my friend Jason said, "Oh, that's no problem. I'll do it," he said. So he started over here, 10 plus 8, and got 18. And then he multiplied 18 by 3 and got 54. Then he subtracted 12 from 54 and got 42. And then he had thinking, well, 42 has to be divided by 4. That's a hard one. Let me see. 40 divided by 4 would be 10. And 2/4, which is 1/2. So he got 10.5. So Jason says, look, the answer's 10.5. And the other guys sort of looked over there and they couldn't see anything wrong with it. But I said, wait a minute now, fellas. That isn't right. What do you mean it's not right? Well, you added that 8 to the 10 before you multiplied by 3. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, hundreds of years ago, mathematicians came up with an order of operations. That's not the way you're supposed to proceed. It isn't, they said? No, it isn't. You're supposed to perform multiplication and division before you do adding and subtracting. You are, they said? Yes, you are. So let's look across here. That 8 times 3 has to be done, and that 12 divided by 4 has to be done before we do any adding or subtracting. Well, they were hovering over. They wanted to make sure we won the meal, but they weren't sure. But they knew I maybe knew a little more math than they did, so they were listening up. So we added, 10, now we multiplied that and got 24. Subtract 12 divided by 4 and got 3. So then we proceed with addition and subtraction. So 10 and 24 is 34. Subtract 3 is 31. So that's the answer for this skill testing question. Well, the others weren't so sure about that, but I convinced them that that was the answer. And we went to the owner of the restaurant and said, our answer to this is 31. He said, you're right. You're the only people in the last 3 weeks that got the right answer to this question. Oh, I said, that's because we know the order of operations. The interesting thing about that order of operations is things can change if you introduce brackets. Now look, if we were to put brackets here like this, how does that change the situation? Well, the order of operations rule says you have to do everything that's inside brackets before you do anything outside the brackets. So we have to perform all of this in here before we divide by 4. Well, we can't forget the other rules about the order of operations. So when we start doing in here, we have to remember that 8 times 3, the multiplication, has to be done before we do any adding or subtracting. So it's going to go like this. 10 plus 8 times 3 is 24 minus 12. So 10 and 24 is 34. Subtract 12 is 22. And then we're going to divide by the 4. The division comes last here because the things were put in brackets. So 20 divided by 4 will be 20 divided by 4 is 5. And we have 2/4, which is a half again. So it's going to be 5.5. A very different answer just because we put those in brackets. Now somebody might wonder, well, I wonder what would happen if we put brackets in a different place. Like let's put them in here. Now does that change anything? Well, we remember the order of operations says work in brackets must be done first. So we're going to look at what's inside those brackets and remembering that multiplication must be done before addition. This is going to be 10 plus 24. And that's going to have to be done before I do these other operations. So 10 and 24 is 34. Then I have subtract 12 divided by 4. Now, we also got to remember that there's a subtraction and a division, and division takes priority. That has to be done first. So 12 divided by 4 will be done. So it's 34 And I do this division. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and we end up with 34 subtract 3 is 31. Now, if you recall, we've seen 31 before. We had 31 back here when we had no brackets, because the order of operations said we had to do the multiplication and the division before we did the adding and subtraction. Basically, putting those brackets in didn't change anything, because we were still going to be doing this multiplication and that division, but it didn't change. The answer still came out to be 31. Mathematicians would say there was no need to put those brackets in. This one that we had at the start, with no brackets, resulted in an answer of 31. You too should remember the order of operations. You might be in a restaurant and get a skill testing question, and you don't want to lose the contest when so much is at stake just because you forget the order of operations. So in situations like this, we remember that we multiply or divide in the order in which they occur. And when those multiplications and divisions are done, we then add or subtract in the order in which they occur across the expression. If there's anything in brackets, brackets are done first. So bracket work, multiplication or division, and then adding or subtracting.